coming out of that machine. They'll be putting them up here. They'll be reading them. They'll be flipping them. I think this is for cleaning, but I don't know. All right.
For years, the Moonshiners cast risked everything to keep an outlaw tradition alive. But the hardest battles many of them faced happened long after the stills stopped running and the cameras stopped filming. One died at just 30 years old. Another spent his final months saying goodbye from a nursing home bed. And the show's most recent loss came after a man who survived a devastating fire, and decades of outlaw living finally lost his final battle. Behind every jar of moonshine was a story of sacrifice, heartbreak, and resilience that many viewers never heard. So who were they really? And what happened during the final chapters of their lives? Join us as we look back at the Moonshiners cast members who passed away. Kenny Law. Kenny's obituary described him as a cat with 9 lives, and the evidence is specific and documented. In 1977, an indoor moonshining operation run by his family went out of control when a propane explosion ignited the building. And although Kenny was outside at the time and could have stayed there, he ran back in to pull his father out of the burning structure, saving him but suffering serious burns in the process that required months of recovery at the University of Virginia Hospital. He did recover fully, and as his obituary clearly states, went right back to his outlaw ways. That instinct to protect those around him, and not himself, defined more than that fire. But in the late 1990s, federal prosecutors gave Kenny a stark choice: turn in the names of his fellow moonshiners or do time himself. Kenny took the time, choosing to live by the same code of silence his cousin Henry had already chosen, rather than turn over a single name. He did his time and came out the other side still unwilling to talk, a decision that only strengthened the respect other distillers in the region already had for him. Discovery added Kenny and Henry to Moonshiners in Season 8, and Kenny discovered something he didn't expect in genuine connection with an audience. And his obituary noted that he really enjoyed meeting fans in person and would often comment on how kind and supportive they were. A warmth that certainly touched a man who had spent the majority of his adult life purposely shying away from the attention of strangers. Kenny, in an interview in 2020, described the scope of what he and Henry ran together at one point, estimating that at its peak, they produced as much liquor as anyone in the country. Henry backed that up, putting the number at as high as 47,000 gallons a year. That same loyalty directly translated to television. In a 2023 holiday special called Ozark Outlaws to the Rescue, Kenny and Henry teamed up with a couple of Arkansas moonshiners to undertake a cross-state bootlegging run, all with the purpose of raising money for Josh Owens, who had recently been injured in a racing accident, transforming what could have been a straightforward episode into a fundraiser in the guise of a storyline. In 2024, Kenny had a heart attack, and although he recovered from it, a blood infection soon developed and spread to his heart and lungs, compounding the damage from the heart attack while interacting with diabetes he had managed for years. Henry told TMZ that Kenny's body just wore out fighting the infection, and his underlying conditions at the same time. After a month spent battling it in the hospital, his family was with him when he died on January 14, 2025, at the age of 68. His last episode actually aired 2 months later, on March 11, 2025, in the Season 14 finale, where he was shown helping a fellow legend in need, an episode the audience watched already knowing he was gone. The Moonshiners' social media account posted a brief tribute urging fans to keep shining in his memory, and his co-star, Steve, said publicly how much it pained him to confirm that Kenny had passed. His co-star, Amanda, described him as a true legend of the craft. He is survived by his daughter, Kenzie, her husband, Nathan, and his grandsons Atlas and Fox, and Law's Choice Distillery still operates in Franklin County today. But his death came in the shadow of a grief the Moonshiners community was still processing from 2 years earlier, when one of the show's oldest and most respected figures had spent an entire year saying his goodbyes from a nursing home bed. Jim Tom Hedrick. Long before his television debut, Jim Tom's reputation had traveled far beyond the mountains where he lived. And as Sugarland's distilling company, which later worked with him extensively, would say, his handcrafted spirits were in demand across the South, and people called him a legend long before any camera showed up. His actual first name was Marvin, but no one who watched the show ever knew that, because Jim Tom was the only name that 3 decades of fans and neighbors ever called him. He came to Moonshiners in Season 2 in 2012, and the audience response was instant, in a way producers hadn't quite anticipated, as he had no interest in performing for a camera because he'd already been interesting for decades without one. His knowledge of distilling was encyclopedic, delivered with the casual authority that only comes from decades of practice. His dry, constant humor combined with a genuine Southern cadence to make watching him feel like listening to a living piece of American history explain itself. His obituary later summed this up well by saying that Jim Tom never met a stranger. He was a series regular from Season 2 through Season 6, received his own dedicated special, Legend of Jim Tom, in 2019, and made his final scripted appearance in Season 10's Smoke to the Fire in 2021 at age 80, still bringing the same unhurried authority to every scene he was in. His partnership with Sugarlands resulted in bottles with his own image on them, which meant viewers who have never bought a product from a television show before found themselves buying his shine simply because they trusted him. He was also a musician, releasing songs like Golly That's Good on the Moonshiners soundtrack in 2014 and Romeo's Got Nothing on Me in 2015, which let his personality reach beyond the show itself and directly into the music his fans listened to at home. In the year leading up to his death, his health declined to the point that he was living in a nursing home, and his co-stars Mark and Digger shared photos of him in a hospital bed in the months before his death, giving viewers the painful understanding of what was happening while there was still time to appreciate what he had been. A few days before the end, Mark and Digger posted that he was comfortable and resting without pain. He died on the morning of September 6, 2023, at 82 years old. He was buried 4 days later at Carver Cemetery, with visitation and services held the same afternoon at a funeral chapel in Robbinsville. Sugarlands said he was particularly looking forward to sharing his lifetime of moonshining knowledge with a new generation. The company president said Jim Tom's blessing was key in creating the authenticity of everything the brand had built. Years after his death, the show hadn't let him go. A subsequent special, Moonshiners Master Distiller, featured surviving cast members offering on-camera tributes to him, proof that his absence continued to shape storylines long after he'd stopped appearing in new footage. But the loss the show had felt most immediately, hardest of all, had been 2 years earlier, from someone who was 30 years old and should, by every reasonable expectation, have had decades left. Lance Waldrup. Lance joined Moonshiners with his father in the early seasons of the show, bringing a creative spark that the older, established cast members just couldn't provide. And while most of the cast worked within time-honored tradition, Lance experimented with absinthe and scotch, pushing the moonshining repertoire in directions the elders of the craft had never gone before on camera. His first attempt at making absinthe apparently went poorly, but Discovery's own retrospective gallery remembered him specifically for the ambition behind the failure, not the failure itself. He left the show in 2019, And while it's easy to assume that his own struggles alone caused that decision, a GoFundMe page set up for his family after his death cleared up the real reason. His mother had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and Lance stepped away to help care for her, while his father, Jeff, went back to a different full-time career. It was only later, in a period that included the arrival of the pandemic and work becoming scarce, that the weight of his own history caught up with him. He was struggling with survivor's guilt over the deaths of his siblings, both from cystic fibrosis, one at 11 years old and the other at 20, grief that the same GoFundMe page said had directly led to drug use before Lance got clean and became, in his family's words, a recovered addict. His mother discovered him unconscious in his bed on February 25, 2021, after he smoked outside all evening and then retired to his room to play video games. Emergency responders pronounced him dead at the scene, and the autopsy, released almost a year later, cited congestive heart failure as the cause, with cardiomyopathy and obesity listed as contributing factors. He was 30 years old. Discovery's official statement recalled him as a distiller of adventurous spirit, always looking to take his flavorful recipes to new heights, which was accurate and also radically insufficient. Like most official statements on young deaths, given everything the public record actually showed him battling at once. His dad, Jeff, has kept his memory alive in the most direct way possible, continuing to distill under the name Jeff and Lance's Carolina Moonshine, a business built entirely around the son he lost. But not every serious threat to a Moonshiners cast member's life has resulted in a grave, and the very next name on this list almost became one of them at 80 miles an hour, on a racetrack, in front of a crowd that had no idea they were about to see him almost die. Josh Owens. Josh was a professional motocross racer before he ever appeared on Moonshiners. That background gave him his fearlessness on camera, and eventually the accident that nearly killed him off of it. It wasn't even his first major motorcycle crash. While at Daytona's Bike Week in 2018, he was hospitalized after crashing earlier in the week, an early warning that the sport he loved carried real, repeatable risk. That risk finally caught up with him on March 4, 2023, when he was competing in an exhibition race at Daytona International Speedway, lost traction coming around the final turn, and hit the wall at about 80 miles per hour. A crash that broke his neck, his back, both legs, his arm, and his shoulder, punctured a lung, and put him into a medically induced coma for 10 days. When Josh woke up, doctors told him he might lose a leg and never walk. Fellow castmate Tim asked fans to keep praying in a public post, noting that at least both of Josh's arms were working again, meaning he'd still be able to help make shine, while a friend launched a GoFundMe to help cover mounting hospital bills. And a fundraiser in his hometown brought out fellow cast members, including Steve, to sign autographs and meet supporters face-to-face. Almost 3 weeks after the crash, Josh shot a video from his hospital bed detailing the full list of what he'd broken, while insisting to fans that he was tougher than the injuries suggested, and he was still here. Josh returned to Moonshiners for season 13 in 2024, appearing on screen in a wheelchair and determined to keep working despite injuries that had nearly ended his life months earlier. By season 14, he had regained enough mobility to walk again and rejoined the crew for active distilling runs, including a peach rye collaboration with Steve and Henry. He described the experience afterward as a second chance at life that he intended to use building a better legacy than the one his accident nearly cut short. Just when Josh's recovery was coming out, another cast member was quietly living with a diagnosis that, at first, felt like something no recovery could fix. Digger Maines. Digger had been apprenticing under the most storied figure in all of moonshining for over 2 decades before his own health scare. But Digger's journey to becoming an Appalachian moonshiner started as a teenager working days at his father's funeral home. At night, he started learning the craft from Popcorn Sutton, one of the most prolific Appalachian moonshiners in American history, and helped Sutton build his very first 500-gallon still. They worked together for more than 20 years, until Sutton's death in March of 2009. Sutton died by suicide, choosing carbon monoxide poisoning rather than report to federal prison after his own moonshining and firearms convictions, a fact that gave real, specific weight to what fans were about to fear for Digger himself 15 years later. When Season 13 premiered in January 2024, Digger told his close friend Mark on camera that he had a rare blood disease and didn't have much time left, language the show's own edit shaped to sound like a terminal diagnosis. And before he'd been able to clarify anything himself, fans who'd spent those hours since the premiere fearing the worst flooded his page with messages of grief. Digger posted directly to social media shortly after, explaining he had no say in the final cut of the episode and didn't know the premiere would make it sound like he was dying. His real diagnosis was chronic lymphocytic leukemia, a serious but not terminal cancer of the blood and bone marrow. According to the National Cancer Institute, chronic lymphocytic leukemia is the most common form of leukemia in adults, but is still classed as rare, with less than 200,000 cases nationally. Digger described the condition as one that would make life hard, but not end it, a distinction that allowed his fans to breathe a sigh of relief after a night where they had thought they had already lost him, with a number of them directly naming Popcorn Sutton and Jim Tom in their relieved replies, the 2 men they had been afraid Digger was about to join. Since the diagnosis, Digger has continued to distill, working with Mark on a light beer business, and, in one storyline, trying to make beer inside the preserved still of Popcorn Sutton himself, treating the disease as a long-term condition to be managed rather than a sentence to be served. His case is a reminder that even a show's own storytelling can, accidentally, turn a manageable illness into what looks like a farewell, and that the gap between a dramatic television edit and a person's actual medical reality can be enormous. Not every scare on this show has come from illness or injury alone, though, since one cast member's brush with death rumors came from an entirely different direction, tangled up with a life that had already run through arrests, a suspended license, and a probation violation before anyone ever asked whether he was even still alive. Steve Tickle. Long before he became a household name with Moonshiners, Steve was a union carpenter, credited with helping build the iconic Clyde's restaurant in downtown Washington, D.C., a trade he had worked in years before any camera crew showed up in Appalachia. That part of his life also included real legal troubles aside from moonshining, an arrest for illegal firearm possession that earned him a suspended 3-year sentence, followed by a probation violation that landed him in prison for 5 months after he was caught driving on a suspended license after a car accident, a stint that kept him out of the main show until his full-time return in Season 7. In this setting of real and recorded contact with the law and with physical danger, rumors circulated on the internet that Steve had died, allegedly from a serious carpentry accident. The rumors got so bad that Steve had to come out and say he was alive and well, and that whatever story basis there was probably came from his well-documented history of near misses, not from anything that actually happened to him. Since returning to the show full-time, Steve has since launched a public campaign for legalizing home distilling, married Carol Ann in a moonshine-themed wedding in 2019, and teamed up with Josh and Henry on the same peach rye run that marked Josh's full return to active distilling, a detail that quietly ties together nearly every man in this entire story into the same handful of episodes. What unites Josh, Digger, and Steve is that each of them in very different ways, whether it was a racetrack wall, a diagnosis made to sound like a death sentence by the show's own editing, or a rumor mill spun up around an already dramatic personal history, came close enough to a permanent ending that fans truly believed, for a time of hours or days, that they had lost someone. All three are still here, still distilling, and still on the show that put their names well outside of Appalachia. And their survival doesn't erase what Moonshiners has really lost. It goes to show that every time a cast member has faced the worst, there was never any guarantee of the outcome. And that's exactly what makes the deaths that the show has really gone through impossible to take for granted. Do you think Moonshiners should have an episode dedicated to the cast members that it has lost? Or do you think the best tribute is just to keep the show going in their memory? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.